What a fine specimen this is. I'm out early on a Sunday. I got a fresh batch of the Payphone Radio cards. I think I got 5 stacks this size, and the printer, for whatever reason, threw in 250 for free. They're good quality print and everything, but I think I have to find a cheaper printer. I've been using Vistaprint. They're expensive and they're pretty slow, unfortunately. But it is good quality stock and everything, but it doesn't need to be, given the placement that I'm just placing it out in the open. I like to do this on Sundays, so it's fortunate that that's one of my days off. I do it on Sundays because normally it seems to be the case that they do their maintenance of these machines on Sundays from midnight to 8, and they do it bi-weekly, every 2 weeks. Doesn't look like they did it this week, but still, this gives the cards as much time to blossom. Gives them a good quantity of time to be available. It doesn't look like they did this one because the device is not working. It's stuck on the Wi-Fi symbol or something, whatever that is. And they haven't plugged the card that I stuck up here last time yet, and that somebody tore off but left the top of it. That has the unintended consequence of blocking the camera, and that should make a certain segment of the Smart City skeptics very happy. I'm energized to be doing this again because, as I think I've said before, this is actually working. It's hard to find tangible proof because nobody's coming from a website, so I can't track referrers or link-ins or inbound links or whatever. But in one instance, or 2 instances actually, I was able to determine that somebody had to have called in from finding one of these because they called from one of these link machines, and there were 2 instances of that. And I mentioned this to an artist friend of mine, and we both agreed that 2 calls from a guerrilla ad campaign like this is a lot. So I'm going to keep with it and see where it goes. I wanted to redesign the card so that it had something on the back listing my other phone numbers, which I've done pitifully little to advertise so far. But I wasn't feeling the design mojo, and I just went ahead and ordered another batch of the same ones. So I'm going to march up 30th Avenue and then swing back down Broadway. I don't think I'm going to do the whole grand tour today. I've been really sinking my teeth into a radio project that's been percolating for a long time. I just hadn't found a point of clarity about how to produce it or how to present it. I've had to do a lot of editing and a lot of, I don't want to say manipulating because I'm not changing anything, but a lot of enhancements because the raw audio quality isn't that great, but I always knew going in that that's not necessary for the raw audio to be a work of art. In fact, that's not really ever expected to happen. There's always processing and post-processing. But it's my shower time radio. That's what I'm calling it now. My original name for it was Shower Talk, but I thought that sounded really pedestrian. I'm not even sure I should use the word shower, even though that's sort of the signature ambiance of the thing, of the sound. But it's what it might sound like. It's what you might think. It's audio of me sitting in the shower. Just talking about my fascinating life, my fascinating and insightful, incisive observations and experiences. It's been a daunting project because it is woefully easy to just sit there for too long. And in so doing, I accumulate mountains and mountains of audio. And at times I haven't been terribly good at self-censoring. And that's been true recently, in fact. But I think I came up with an appropriate workaround that actually adds intrigue to the programming. I've been poor at self-censoring. Typically I'm very good at this, and others have commented on how I can talk about people I know, women I've boned, any kind of intimate or drastic experience. I can talk about it in detail without identifying who's involved or who I'm giving no clue who I'm talking about, no clue to their identity. I've become expert at that, I think, because I want to tell stories about some of these people, but I don't want to humiliate them or expose them. One of my main techniques is waiting 6 months before I talk about it, or just waiting whatever seems like a safe waste of time. Not safe. I was going to say safe space of time, but I saw this word waste, and well, I'm going to get a still picture of this. So I was saying one technique, which is obvious, is to just wait. Like the story, there's nothing timely about most of this. So I wanted to tell the story of the woman I dated, who we'd been dating for like 6 weeks, I think, before she saw fit to tell me that about 6 months earlier, she fell for an online dating scam and wired her life savings off to some dude in Turkey who had her believing he was a Marine being held hostage in Afghanistan or some crazy shit. So it doesn't matter what the story was. It was all a bunch of crap, but the plot thickened, I guess you'd say, in many ways, the moment she decided to tell me that, because I was kind of into her. I thought she might be some kind of prospect for FWB, if nothing else. But I couldn't do this because it became clear that, and she was not subtle or coy about saying that she had pissed away her life savings and she was looking for somebody to get it back from. She was looking for somebody to make her whole, as she said. Her exact words, I need somebody to make me whole. And she wasn't talking about love or romance. She was talking about suing somebody, or marrying a guy and suing her. Or marrying a rich guy and suing him for divorce, which is not a new scam by any estimate. And she made a huge mistake of thinking that I had a lot of money. I do not. I don't know how I created that impression, but I think she actually might have actually liked me as a dude and wanted to stay connected, and maybe she filled in blanks of her own with regard to my background. But I can say with certainty that I never deliberately meant to give any impression that I had a lot of money. That was the last time I ever saw her. And I wanted to tell this story. There's a lot more to that story than that, and I posted the Fuller account on Facebook, and I almost got run off of the freaking Facebook by people who said I was humiliating this woman and I had degraded her and I had exposed her or something. I didn't give the tiniest clue who I was talking about, their identity, their location, anything. And for all these detractors knew, I was just making the whole thing up. I mean, I wasn't, but I do also, one of my other techniques is to throw in fictional flourishes. But it's always harmless. It's just to make it a story, more of a story. I also displace time. Well, I already said I'll wait 6 months before I tell any of these sordid tales of woe or whatever they are. In the same spirit, I'll talk about something that just happened as if it happened 6 months ago. But I'm always careful not to give any clue who I'm talking about. The only exception to that in recent times was the burlesque stripper, but she was the farthest thing from camera shy, or shy about anything about herself. She wanted the exposure, or any exposure. To her, any publicity is good publicity. The other women in my last several years have been entirely the opposite, and I totally respect that. But I still want to tell their stories. And I can do that because I'm the master of discretion. But in my shower time, which is still a working title, there are a few problems or a few annoyances with the format. And one of them is that in that relaxed, even dare I say sensual environment, it's pretty easy for me to trail off and not finish a thought. I mean, I'll do that anyway, even when I'm having a conversation with another person, but it just seems a lot easier for my thoughts to just flow with the water, flow with the water that's pouring over me and going down the drain. But I'm liking the sound. I am technically live with this project, but nobody knows where it is except for one person that I sent it to last night. I don't think he's had time to tune in yet. By the way, there's a payphone check coming up here, or a payphone. What do you call it? Pedestal. I wouldn't be surprised if the one I left here 2 months ago is still here. Yep, there it is. This is probably the most pitiful place you could stick one of these things. Look at this thing, though. This. Get these wires out of the way. That's a face. That's 2 eyes, and that's a mouth. And I don't know what that is. Maybe that's tears, a teardrop. Maybe that's what this is, too. That's the face of a crying voice in the wilderness, lamenting the loss of this payphone. That's exactly what it is. I'm sure you're seeing me say this and you're saying, yes, that is exactly what that is. The shower time, though, I can't even stand saying that. It just sounds so predictable, a name. I mean, Payphone Radio, I never really liked that name either, but it does tell you a lot about it just from its name. but I'm going to keep calling it shower time because that's how I've tagged all the OGG files. I've moved on from MP3 to OGG, and so far I think it sounds as good, if not better, and the file sizes are smaller. That's become a thing because my streams are now hosted in India, and the audio stream is fine, but FTPing the files up to the server can be pretty damn slow across the ocean like that. So one of the drawbacks of the format, or annoyances to me at least, is how I trail off with a thought and never return to it. And then there's the problem of not censoring myself appropriately. But I've taken the route of bleeping things out, and that adds to the production and editing time. But I don't care. I started playing it back objectively, and I thought the bleeping actually made the whole thing sound more intriguing and sort of heightened the mystery for some people, or it might have that effect. It also shows that I care. That I care about not identifying people who either have been in my life or have not really been in my life, and that latter scenario comes to bear with a woman I've been seeing on the subway for about 3 or 4 weeks now, I think. Through some slips of kismet and a bit of predatory stalking type of techniques. I've learned a lot about her without ever saying a word to her. And that's just like a symptom of the world we live in. Or not a symptom, but a quality, a signal, whatever. How easy it is to summon the life story of someone with nothing more than a sliver of information about them. And in this case, she has a pretty broad overshare public presence, a confessional presence. I've learned to read the tea leaves because I know the code words about this kind of thing, because I would. The code words are from her writings that she's been suicidal, made an attempt, at least one. And she's had some dark times. And I'm not going to keep an eye on her going forward, but the recent stuff I've been doing with the shower time. Please, somebody think of a better name for it. But the accounts involving her that I've been talking about included just a little TMI about her identity. But I bleeped it all out, and I don't think any reasonable person would think to look for it or think to try to solve the mystery, because there's nothing there for them anyway. Nothing to be solved. It just sounds too identifying when really it isn't. But what I really love is the sound of the rushing water. And my voice seems to cut through it pretty effectively. But I did invoke some software enhancements to make it sound almost professional. And And something I would not have done a long time ago. A long time ago, meaning 5 or 6 years ago, is the tagline of this radio is that you listen to me talk. I forget what I called it now, but I say something like, listen to me talk, bathe myself, and do whatever else people do in the shower. So there's a big spoiler alert for you. Once in a while, my conversation trails off and I start masturbating. And I like the way it sounds. I guess it's like what I guess you'd call a climax of my decades spent trying to relieve myself of the shame and stigma of self-satisfaction, self-gratification. And maybe I can be a spearhead. Everything I say now starts to sound sexual. A spearhead. I can be the climax of the movement. The movement to erase the stigma and to erase the shame. I've read a few forums about this, discussion forums, and there are those who are completely public about it, and these are people with jobs and reputations that have nothing to do with public displays of self-affection. But I'd like to be, I don't want to be like the face of, the face of masturbation, but I do think we're going to come to a time in a generation where a certain level of public masturbation is going to be as acceptable as public displays of affection between two people. So a kiss on the cheek from between two affectionate lovers. There's going to be some way of doing the same to yourself that expresses self-love, and that's going to be okay. That's not going to be considered selfish or creepy. And maybe it'll take more than a generation, but that is my prediction. I don't know why that church bell is ringing. If you can hear that. For whom the bell tolls, right? Or for what the bell tolls. I maintain my fascination with church bells, but collecting the sounds became a bit of a chore. They're supposed to do it at a certain hour, but then they don't. Or they do it 5 minutes early or 5 minutes late, and I give up or I get there too late. The beauty of church bells is that nothing about their timbre, nothing about their sound has changed since they first were created, however many centuries before Christ. So you're hearing it now like Jesus heard it. Although I don't know if it's too far off in the distance for this mic to pick up, although this is a pretty good mic. I'm not not going to talk about masturbation too much more, but I see these women on Chatterbait, and that site is such a phenomenon. You talk about a way to completely erase the embarrassment or the solitude or the shame. Once when I was in high school, I walked in. I was at a summer camp type of thing, and something happened that I thought this other kid should know about. And his door was not closed. It was not locked, or it was not even closed. It was open about an eighth, I guess. And in dormitory speak, that seemed to be a signal that it was okay to barge in if there was some good reason to. I don't remember what the occasion was, but I barged in to tell him that you got to come see this or something like that. And he was lying in bed with his big cock in his hand, jerking off to some porn, or maybe it wasn't porn, but I don't know that we were allowed to get that into our little summer camp, but he was working it pretty hard. And he stopped, and he covered it up with a pillow, and he was really clearly mortified. And I pretended I didn't see anything. But he was like, you could tell his heart was like pounding. And he said, please close the door, or please leave. If he'd said, please close the door, that would have had a different implication, I suppose, because I was inside the room. But he said, please go. And I never said anything to him. I never said anything to anybody. And I remember, if anything, it made us better friends, because next time I saw him, I think it was the next day, we both shared this knowing grin, this knowing look, which I interpreted to mean that he knew and I knew that the secret was safe. strange form of bonding. And I stayed friends with the guy. But I've read a number of discussion forums about this stuff and who does it, and there are a lot of very public people. I think I trailed off on that thought. I was talking about some people have public reputations, they have jobs, and they're public in some way or other, but under their full real name and identity, they are proud to talk about how long they've been able to edge and how long they can go in a day, like a continuous session. It's a funny license plate. And they offer up techniques, although for men there really isn't a lot of room for imagination. I mean, you can use cock rings or lube or food or something like that kind of thing, but really, you just spank it. This used to be a payphone, by the way. I don't know if this is a biased stereotype or an ugly stereotype of mine, but it seemed that, and I'm not trying to draw a stereotype, it's fact that the people I found talking that way, talking about how glorious it is and how natural and how it's like a wonder of nature. Most of those people are gay men. And I haven't made any kind of study of this or inquiry, but I think it's different between gay men and heterosexual when it comes to exhibitionism like this. In those same forums, I'll read from mostly devout religious types who see it as a form of self-degradation. And I think that's what the Catholic Church's official policy on it is that you can do it, but it's you're degrading yourself and you're wasting yourself. There again, like when I talk about how long the decades of peeling away the stigma and the shame and embarrassment, the church has been no help. The conventional wisdom throughout high school, when most of us started doing this, I actually started earlier, and then I was 13, I think. I mean, I know when it was. I know I was 13. What am I saying? But the conventional wisdom was that the word had come down recently from the Vatican that it was no longer banned or forbidden. I don't think it ever really was, because how could they forbid it? What are they going to do? What consequence could they? Well, I guess I can imagine a religion where there'd be consequences, but how much does God really know, is what I'm saying about what you're doing behind that bathroom stall. And one of the great Bible verses of all time was Onan wasted his seed. And I believe the scenario, as we discussed it in high school, was that Onan was having intercourse but didn't want to come inside of the woman. So he did what we called, what is it called anyway? Coitus interruptus, where he pulled out and shot his load somewhere else. And I'm going to reread up on this, because that's really not what it was about. But to some people, that's the most famous verse. Onan wasted his seed, or one of the most famous Bible verses. But to me, the more famous line is the next Bible verse, which was, "This angered the Lord." Yeah, the Lord really gives a fuck about a fuck, right? But getting back to the discussion forums, that I'd read about this, there were the very public ones, but then there were the religiously devout ones who considered it degrading and selfish, as if, I don't know, I can understand that perspective. I don't align with it, but selfishness implies that I don't know. There's an ugly trajectory that line of thinking could go down. An ugly trajectory involving a scenario where sexual urges would drive you to rape, because it's selfish to just waste your seed, right? Ow. Oh, I forgot about this one. Yeah, I've left a mess on some of these. I don't know if these are just impossible to get out. Seems like you should be able to separate the frame from the panel, but from the tablet screen, but I gotta switch the battery. To take the selfish thing to another direction. There's another layer to that. At least I think there is. There's a layer maybe not a layer, but a wireframe connection, if you will. it says if you're not sexually involved with a partner that you're a lesser member of society. And what do those lesser people do? They masturbate because nobody wants them. I guess that's where I was trying to get at, was there's the part of the stigma of masturbation is that people do it because nobody wants them sexually. And I can tell you, bona fide, that I've never stopped doing that, even when I'm in long-term relationships where I get sex every fucking day. I was with this woman for a few years. I swear by the end we were going at it like 15 times a week. And I was still jerking off. Maybe not every day, but... And I know she was masturbating too, because she would tell me about anecdotes about getting caught or where she did it. She did it in some unlikely places. So with her, it was all perfectly above board. I think I was talking in an earlier video about a film director that I worked with who didn't want to talk about this subject at all. And she thought male sexuality was icky if it wasn't being directed toward her. At least that's my interpretation. The latter half of that is my interpretation, but whatever the reasons, she just thought male sexuality was icky. And she didn't want it to be a part of our film. Even though, like I said, this film was supposed to be about me. And I can just imagine the shocking headline, the shocking reviews on whatever the movie review magazines are, Entertainment Weekly. The headlines would be, "Single man lives alone and masturbates." But there's that element of,
it was great, man.
The cultural stigma of being single is not universal, but because I've talked to many people who don't even know what I'm talking about when I say that being single leaves you out of a lot of life's great bounty when it comes to social situations. When you're single, you don't get invited to things as much as you do when you're in it with somebody. And I know this is a fact. Whoops, I thought that fell. So that's all I have to say about the shower time thing now, except that I really need to find a better name for it. But I like the way it's sounding, and on account of that, I'm not going to do as broad a canvassing of my radio cards today, because I want to get back to that. Oh, but the other big audio find of the week, or not that this was a find, the shower stuff has been, I've been in awe of it for a long time because there's so much of it. And I think that guy was honking at me. There's so much of it and it seems so daunting to process through all of it and edit out all the silences and whatever else, but now that I'm engaged, it's all good. But the other audio find comes from I guess about a month ago, month and a half. I woke up famous, as I like to say. I said that somewhat sarcastically because I knew that that so-called fame was going to be very fleeting.
It was insane. Yesterday.
But someone on Reddit posted
We used to do like
a link to the Payphone Radio and specifically the phone number that you can call in to hear it. And they posted this with the intent of discussing the audio content. And that happened for a little bit, but it quickly became revealed. It was quickly revealed that when two people connected at the same time, they could talk directly to each other. Nobody expected that. I did know that the setup was like that, but I just never thought anybody was going to find it. And this little glitch, if you want to call it that, led to a extremely unlikely date with a burlesque stripper who I connected with over this mechanism. What I discovered this week, though, is that I actually recorded all of this. The PBX recorded every call that came in during that time. And you hear a lot of, there's basically one person leading the discussion. There's one person trying to understand what the hell was going on here. One person who for a long time thought that if nobody was talking, then my audio, my radio stream would play. But after like 3 hours of this, we figured out that if two people call at the same time, they are connected to each other. And that's how it's supposed to work. It's a conference bridge. With a conference bridge, typically the first person calls in. If there's nobody else there, they will hear either nothing or, the way I set it up, they're hearing what's called music on hold. The music on hold can be any kind of audio content, but I found the way to, and usually people just play some kind of muzak or, flute music or something. Water music by Handel is a popular one. But when they call my conference bridge, first of all, most people don't think that's what it is. They think it's just a broadcast, if you will. When people call mine, if they're the only one there, they hear the shoutcast stream. I was able to link the live shoutcast to the music on hold. And I set it up like this, knowing that it would be possible if two people called in at once, that they'd be connected, and honestly I thought that might be a little weird, but I let it anyway because I thought it could be cool, it could be interesting, and it became that for a couple of days at least. But in the same way, like, there were some glitches involved that increased the mystery of all this, or made it seem all the more intriguing and enchanting to the people who called in. But long story short, I got all these interactions that people made when the two people called at the same time and they would talk. I recorded all of it. And that includes a lot of discussion about me, because as all this unfolds, people start figuring out who set this up, who I am. And they jumped to a lot of really weird conclusions about me. But I'm not complaining. Some of those conclusions don't seem to have been clarified or made right, by my estimation at least. And I actually stopped listening to it. I don't like listening to people talk about me in this kind of way. I don't like reading reviews of my stuff, although the last article from Peter Sciarra was pretty good. And most of it was me anyway. He left out the part about how audio of the Payphone Radio was circulating on the dark web for, I don't know how long this lasted, probably a couple of weeks. That's right, I forget this one is recalcitrant. Yeah, that's good enough. The audio from there was circulating on the dark web. Where people were discussing it as if they had found some secret trove of audio that was not supposed to be up for grabs. And it was, like I said, I read enough to figure out that that's what people were saying. It was one of these dark web things where it's a message board where discussions self-destruct after a certain period of time and the audio was stored on some facility where if nobody accesses it for X period of time, it self-destructs. And that appears to be what happened. But he left that part out. And he also left out the punchline or the denouement to that story. And here I go back to this subject again, but it used to be that the final piece, the final recording on the Payphone Radio was made not from a payphone because quarantine and lockdown made a publicly shared handset seem like the perfect conduit for transmission, and I didn't really need to play games with that. So I was calling in from Skype or my own phone trying to keep the spirit alive. But I finally gave up because it just wasn't the same. And to keep doing this forever I had nothing to prove by continuing to do this in the strict payphone only format. I had nothing to prove in doing that for the rest of my life. And I knew it wasn't going to be possible anyway because they were getting rid of those things with impunity. But he left the part out about the dark web and how among the other stuff that was recorded by these dark web denizens, they published them with the warning that this audio ends with 15 minutes of the sound of a man masturbating. And they said this with this foreboding or this like warning that didn't really make sense to me. This is the dark web, isn't it? Isn't this where anything goes? Truth of the matter is, what I've seen of the dark web is pretty tame, to be honest with you. But I haven't dug into all the bad stuff, the CP and the drugs and whatever. So that's a pretty naive assessment for me to make, but it's knowingly naive, willfully ignorant. But I didn't just include that audio to be radical or drastic or whatever you want to say. It was a shout out to solitude and quarantine and the sudden celibacy that so many of us suddenly found ourselves experiencing. I was certainly one of those. I tried to have phone sex with the woman I'd been with, but she just wasn't very good at it, and we basically just called it off until later, months later, when we were both vaxxed and getting tested regularly. So I'm going to get back to what I was doing with the shower time, and if anybody can think of a better name for it.